Come on. Jeff.
All right, guys. Sorry, everyone, for terrible choice in music. Had to have some fun with the Halloween theme. It was either that or like Monster Mash. So, try to get some points for creativity there. Anyways, welcome everyone to another Note to File Live. Really excited about this one. Probably a topic very close to a lot of our hearts on the site level. And not just that, but we have some really smart guys here, smarter than me. So I want to give you guys an opportunity. Please introduce yourselves, and let's start with Doug.
Thanks, Brad. Nice for music. So yeah, I'm
It was too long.
I know. I was going on. I thought it was a 12-inch, but you're okay. We're there now. So my name is Doug Bain. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at KCR. KCR is a mid-sized CRO. Call ourselves a petite CRO. But I don't know if 1,000 staff can be petite, but anyway, we are. Prior to working at KCR, I was almost entirely in the vendor side. So hopefully I could wear two hats, the vendor hat and the CRO hat. But let's see how the discussions go.
Very good. And yeah, if you don't follow Doug on LinkedIn, you guys should. I've always learned a lot. I don't always understand it, but I learn a lot when I read it.
I don't understand it.
And then the man who brought us all together here, Sylvain, please introduce yourself.
Pleasure, yes. Thanks for the collaboration, first of all, Brad. I appreciate it, always. So Sylvain Berthelot, I work for Calyx, where I'm the Senior Director of Voice of Customer and Strategy. I've always been on the vendor side, but I keep hearing feedback from various sites and others about how painful technology can be. So I'm trying to do the best to make it simpler. I also have a couple of podcasts, so I'll do my advertising if you don't mind.
Please.
So we run Calyx Cafe at Calyx, and I also have my own podcast called On One Condition to raise awareness through interviewing patients.
Nice, love it. And was honored to be on Calyx Cafe. I think I was one of the first early guests. I think at least it was for one of the first podcasts I had been on that wasn't my own. So that stuck with me. So,
yep.
Paul, we've not had the opportunity to meet. I know that you've been at it for a hot minute, all the way back to ClinPhone, back in like 2001. So please tell us a little about yourself.
Well, thanks for including me in the discussion. I think these discussions are great. And you know what you and Sylvain do to promote discussion is just wonderful. We need to do more of that. I'm in my 23rd year of doing this. I don't know what that means in human years, but it's been a long time. And probably means I have, 10, 15 left in me. And I really want to get it right. In that remaining time, because I don't feel like we have as an industry. So it's really great to be included in these discussions. So what I do, I work for Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine, which until recently was called Janssen. I'm the head of the Randomization and Trial Supply Management Group, which a lot of people call IRT. I try to call it RTSM, a little bit more reflective of what it does rather than what it is. But like I said, I really want to get it right in my remaining time in this industry, and we haven't. I know you always ask people how they got into it. I didn't really, plan this as a little kid. I wanted to be the next Jacques Cousteau. If everybody remembers Jacques Cousteau, that's who I wanted to be. Some of that idealism, I think will come out in the conversation today. I remain an idealist. I really think about how things can be and should be. So great discussion for today.
Very cool. And my inimitable co-host, Fox.
Yep. So for one, I don't know you yet, Paul, but I watch you all the time on Calyx Cafe, and I've interviewed Doug. I've had that opportunity. I'm Daniel Fox. I'm the founder and CEO of the Clinical Research Payment Network. I'm the host of CRPN Central. It's a podcast dedicated to trying to explore all of the different challenges that we have in clinical research. And I'm a huge site advocate. CRPN has over 80 sites in the network now. We're signing on our first sponsors. And as a result, we're turning into a really good ecosystem of quality research performance throughout a really chaotic, wild, wild west.
Very good. And just as always, you the guys out there listening, I know there's a bunch of you out there. Feel free to drop some comments in the little comment box as we go along.
I think your song scared everyone away, Brad.
I know. It's usually I'm usually getting comments straight when the music starts, so people must not like the old DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Yeah, can't win them all, Anyways, I want to go ahead and let Sylvain kick us off and kind of get us going here. So if you would, man, hit us.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So when I look at what we do as an industry, and since I've been in IRT, I think it was 13 years ago that I started, I've seen the number of IRT systems available on the market increase almost exponentially. I mean, there's still new IRT vendors, and there's probably between 20 and 30 at the moment that are vendors that people could name if you're in the industry. And it's just one example of an in-clinical technology. And I keep hearing how difficult it is for sites to juggle all those different technologies. So I thought it would be a good topic to discuss. I'm prepared that we may not all agree, because I think it's a bit of like pulling the blankets to one side and pulling it off someone else's feet. But I think it's a good debate to have, a good discussion to have, and I'm glad that everyone agreed to take part, because I think it's good to have everyone different representations to have a good discussion. Brad, actually, I'm going to start with a question to you, if you don't mind. Pick one technology. It doesn't have to be IRT or RTSM. How many different types or different vendors do you use for one single type of technology?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. And to your point, there are new ones all the time. I just did a call with a sponsor we've worked with previously who had a whole stack of things, and we're doing a new study with them. And now they're using a completely new set of vendors to do all the same things. We see this over and over again, and I hadn't heard of half of them before. So yeah, I mean, there's easily, depending on the technology, there could be anywhere between 5 and a dozen different vendors, all sort of being used in different combinations across all the different studies. So yeah, it's crazy. It's hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
So what IRT stands for, Interactive Random Technologies.
Interactive Response Technology.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I wouldn't, Brad. Obviously I wouldn't disagree with you. And I think the blame should lie with the sort of life cycle within sponsor and CRO companies, where the impact on organizations on change is not really valued correctly. It's just, what's the new shiny great thing? Let's just bring that in. Great. Hey, a pat in the back. Great. You must be an innovator. New technology all the time. When the impact of that change is not necessarily measured, especially for sites who are going, not another one. Yeah. And so I mean, that's one aspect as well. But I'll not steal your thunder here. I think there's many issues to discuss here.
An interesting one might be grandfathering, even because maybe sometimes with the duration of trials, maybe technology isn't grandfathered out fast enough for the new technology to come in. So as a result, you get like this weird pipeline development at the site level, at the end user development, where they're running 13-year trials. That happened. I had to have a 13-year-old piece of technology coming and running on a trial now. And I guarantee you there were generations after that were in different trials across the ages. But somehow, some way, the technology is moving faster than the clinical trial itself.
Yeah, nobody wants to. I mean, it's easy to sell old stuff because it's safe, and to some degree, I can understand it works. I just actually read an article, you guys might have seen it, where an ePro company just acquired an EDC company that's been around since 1992, and I thought, interesting. Is that progress? Maybe they've written a new product and I don't know about it, so maybe I shouldn't completely diss it. But there's not many industries where you can get away with selling the same product for 20 plus years, which it does happen. I won't point the fingers, but it does happen. And I think you're absolutely right, is that people think of their clinical trials and think, right, what's the safest thing I can do? Maybe buy old is the safest thing I can do, and we'll use it, but without really measuring the impact of that. It does have an impact. The lack of connectivity, lack of single sign-on, sites suffer because of that. And it's safe for the buyer, but maybe not safe for the consumer, which is the sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was some good time spent at a recent IRT conference talking about multiple accounts, user accounts that a site has just for IRT systems.
Yes.
And Brad, when you're talking about 4 or 5 systems, I wonder what that means to you in a real life way for the number of accounts you have, your way of working. What's that all mean?
Yeah, and I will say this. In some ways, we don't like it, but I also think, look, it's not rocket science. Like, I know how to create a bookmark. I know how to save a password with LastPass. It's not that hard to click a button and get where I need to go. But to your point too, that there's I guess if we're gonna, I'll be nice, but there are companies that I've got different login for the 12 different studies just for that one portal. That's when it starts to get wacky, and then you've got URLs that are unique to each trial sometimes. And when you're working across, your site gets bigger. You got more coordinators. You have people backing each other up. You have coordinators leave. That stuff oftentimes leaves with the coordinator because it's challenging to keep it in one place. There are tools for that. Again, we're not complete technology idiots at the site level. We can't find a portal and log into it, but it just doesn't make sense, and at the very least, I'd be curious, something that Doug said made me think I love some transparency. Why did you use this company and now you're switching to this company? Is there a great reason? Because if so, maybe sites are okay, cool. We get it. We can get on board with this constant change, but it all seems pretty much the same, at least at our level, right?
So I don't know, Paul, if you want to comment on that, why you changed technology, but I saw something interesting. So in a different conference, not the IRT conference, but a different conference, I heard a sponsor say that, or present on something they're doing to give a package to patients or a portal to patients so that all the technology they access is in one place. It makes sense. So I raised my hand and asked, what about sites? Do you do the same for sites? And the answer was no. And we actually have a comment about from Pradeep saying, well, it also comes from tech companies, like they are to blame. And that sponsor gave me the same answer, like maybe someone should do something about it, but it seems like it's down to technology vendors to address that problem. And I can say that, like, again, going back to what I see on the market, there's not, I can't see anyone trying to properly solve that problem. And what I see in the industry is that as soon as there's a bit of the market share that seems to be open, someone will start building a new EDC, a new RTSM, a new ePro, and it's only growing. It's not reducing in numbers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I question this. Like, are the tech companies to blame? Like, because I don't know if I were in a different world, and I was like, if I build something and you're going to buy it, then I'm going to keep building it because you're going to keep buying it. So the sponsors, I mean, shouldn't it be on the sponsors to
you
say,
vote
like,
with your dollar,
no?
right?
Right.
You always vote with your dollar. And that means that the people who consume the product are the ones that are going to drive those tech companies to innovation. I see Doug thinking about this.
I see Doug disagreeing.
I know you're going. No, I'm laughing.
I was just saying the question. The question of the podcast is: should sites have their own eClinical technology? And I wanted to start with an example, and this might be an example and something to consider. I was running a site, and someone rage quit. They left, and they were responsible for the login credentials. They had the admin credentials, which locked me out of very important portals for the site's trial performance for 6 months, because it was go to the CRA is going to go to the sponsor is going to go to the tech vendor is going to assign another ID. So that was a really good example of how utilization of site performance and business operations owned by tech that is sponsored by sponsors did not work. It was a nightmare. I finally had to escalate it up to the highest levels to get access to the portals that I needed to run a trial because of the broken systems. So for just in that example alone, at the very least, I would imagine that sites should have some form of site admin permissions to at least assign IDs for portal logins for their studies at their sites. Now, that's probably a lot more complicated than I would know. I'm not the developer, but it's a perfect example of how dependence on eClinical technology on sponsors does not work at all times for sites.
Yeah. Funnily enough, Daniel, I used to work with a tech back in 1999, between 1999 and 2002, where the sites could add their own user. And it had that capability where you couldn't add any old user. You had to add them within the bounds of what a site could have. So investigator or study nurse, right? And obviously once they'd done that, they could log in, right? But that is just one of a series of capabilities that comes and goes as new technologies emerge and disappear. They'll pop up with their set of features, and sometimes they're good at this and sometimes they're good at that. That product's dead and gone. But it is an issue. And I think, it's not just, one of the things you're pointing out there, Daniel, is the fact that, it's not necessarily just the tech, it's the operations and support around about the tech. And, potentially you could have a similar issue if you'd license it yourself. You had more hoops to jump through to get to the person that could answer the question and fix that issue. So I would lay the blame in that case with the organization that.
Oh, it's 100% communication, 100% communication pathway. Mm-hmm. I went directly to the tech group and got it fixed that day. It was 100% that communication. But that might go to this. And this is from a site's perspective. And honestly, Doug, the interview with you changed my life and how I see this. So it really, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But when you when a sponsor or CRO approaches a site and they say, we would like to contract you for services provided, you are going to perform these services, you're going to deliver to us data, and the data would be like the product of the service provided. And then as a result, we're going to translate this into technology. In a very, very easy way, that's it. So anything up to the delivery of data, the product itself, going to the sponsor, the CRO, it makes sense for it to be centralized into a sponsor kind of way. So the sponsors can own that e-technology. Anything that involves the actual performance of the services, it makes sense for that to be at the site level, because that is what the sites are agreeing to do. We agree to perform these services. Now, the gray, blurry area between there is that transition between services provided and data delivered to the sponsor. And I think that is kind of like that is where the lines aren't quite established yet. And that might be where we can have a discussion is, first of all, what do you think about that analogy and that the purview as far as e-clinical technology goes in this clinical research site sponsor CRO relationship?
Tricky. So my, I've not been no secret. I've always been a fan of moving towards like platform, single instance platform solutions, which of course means that the sites that would like to make a choice of their technologies would be bound to whatever the CRO or sponsor had chosen. But at the same time, I see where you're coming from. You want to be in control of your own destiny. But that then comes down to connectivity. I've struggled with connectivity, and the whole industry has struggled with connectivity to send data and metadata between system A and system B. And that's existed for 25 years. And I don't see someone coming up with a magic bullet to fix the problem of connectivity between systems.
No. So
to say that we throw more technology into the mix might potentially make things worse, So unless we can see some, I see some standards. I worked in the CEDAS standards back in 1999, 2000, and they're still bumping around trying to solve the problems that they're still not solving.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because I like the idea that you shared, Daniel, with like having essentially you have your tool that you use that you would select as a site, and then that tool would then send the data to the sponsor or the CRO, which is what they need at the end of the day. But then you have this problem of standardization, and it's a problem that, Paul, you've seen me try to launch a discussion on standardization within just the RTSM or IRT space, and actually we didn't go very far at all because I see sponsors not agreeing between calling participants or patients or subjects or calling shipment a shipment or a consignment. And in a way, the vendors, like we enable that. We allow to use certain terms at study level, which then enable different terms, but reduce the ability to standardize in a way. And which is crazy because no matter what we call it, it will have a patient number, it will have a shipment number, it will contain certain kits and so on. So I think there is like in an ideal world, there is room for this separation between the tool and the data. But it's how we could get there. And then, Paul, I don't know from your end if it would be valid, actually.
Remember how I started by saying I was an idealist?
Yeah.
I also have this realist gene in me too. They're often conflicting, but the idealist in me says it shouldn't really matter where the technology comes from. It could come from everybody, and it would work, or anybody, and it would work. I think the reality, and we're starting to touch on it now. The reality is that we're not unified in our processes and our ways of working, and I am wary about adding more technology to that, because then it's just kind of more ways of working, and I can already see within my 20 some years, I feel like the industry's kind of going like this, and I really feel what the industry needs to be doing is this. We need to be converging around our ways of working, and we really need to understand, as we enter in this period of site and patient centricity, we really need to understand how does the site need their data provisioned. I'm not so much worried about like a randomization transaction or a dispensing transaction. I think we're fine in those little areas. But when it comes to the reports that you need and the notices and confirmations, I'm not sure we've really understood that. And provided solutions in a consistent way. And the reason we're not providing good solutions is because we're all over the place underlying the solutions in our processes and ways of working. And we got to start getting together. That's why these discussions are good, so that we can seize on some common ground and get those processes and ways of working more aligned.
So I had an interesting question for the vendors. If sites had money, would you target them as paying customers? If sites had money,
yeah.
Do you guys want money? There's a question. It's a tough one.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say is the market is going the way it is because of the flow of revenue and resources. We know where the money is. If you talk to anyone who does a startup right now, they're going to say trying to target sites as your sources of revenue is like the valley of death, which means that the way that the market is flowing is going, kind of trickle down, what I call top-down tech. It's sponsored telling sites what to use, primarily because sites don't have the money to pay for it. And that's part of it. The initial conversation comes straight from the CTA, just trying to figure out the expectations between the sites who are signing an independent contractor agreement with the sponsor or the CRO. These are the expectations we have of you. This is what we expect you to do and to provide. Within that contract, it says sites contain the environment and the facilities required to perform this trial. And within that is embedded the expectation to at least have technology that can be utilized to perform those services. I saw one of the comments on here was about sample collection. One of those comments about a lot of the different contingencies that we have to do here. A lot of the sites that I work with, the way that they consider it is as whenever there is sample data being collected, whether it's through surveys, medical records, samples, whatever it might be, it is the site's sole responsibility to perform that as a service until it leaves their building. So like sample wise, as soon as they deliver it to that courier, then they have performed their services according to the quality they have. As soon as it hits that courier and it goes to a central lab, sites there's nothing they can do about it. That's kind of like where their job ends and they send it off to the next part of the story. But I guess my question is, like in this world of the decentralized trials, in this world of a lot of the things that we're doing, where you're going to see a lot more focus on the site as an enterprise level network, do you think that sites will have the opportunity to choose the technologies that work best for their networks, enterprises, whatever it might be? And as a result, do you see a shift in the market to where sites will be not only owning their own eClinical technology, but also driving the development of eClinical technology?
So it's interesting, and I think there's two questions the second one about sites driving the development of clinical technology, I kind of see that already, because where maybe 5 years ago it was sole focus on the buyer, so the sponsor. Now I see much more vendors like us focusing on the end user, and we want to make everyone's life easier. And like when we develop new functionalities, we consult with the end user. So I think sites are listened to more and more in that area. In terms of selecting their own technology, I think the shift that we would need is not something that would be study by study, because that's how a lot of the technology is bought at the moment. But from a site point of view, that would be more of an enterprise-wide selection of one technology across all your needs. And actually, I think that could work, because then it's more of a like subscription-based expense, and it's less of a we need, like you wouldn't. The reason, for example, why an IRT would be too expensive for a site is that it does much more than what a site cares about. If you select just a portion of that and you apply it across all your studies, then you can enter much different discussions when you're selecting the system, and a different way of purchasing it.
I agree. I hope to see a world where when studies come into sites through feasibility, part of that feasibility is the site saying, by the way, we're compatible in all of these different mainstream technologies, that it's accepted as a standard. And here we go back to standardization. It's like trying to corral cats. I get it. But the whole idea is, if sites were to come in and say, these are the technologies that we are compatible with, they put themselves on the map as a competitive site that can help to give sponsors the ability to align their trials. It's kind of like you walk into a store and you say, hey, this store accepts this credit card. A little sticker on the door. I know I can spend my money correctly at this store. It's going to be like that in the future, where you're going to have, like you said, these enterprise level sites with, really, really huge network community outreach that says we abide by these standards. And so therefore it might be best if the trials that you present us are with these standards. And if you get enough of those sites adopting the same standards, then maybe that would help technology developers and sponsors to select what they need to be compatible with the services of the site that they choose.
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, I think that's a very good way to put it, Sylvain and Dr. Fox, I think. So you're already seeing these technologies, platform technologies. So let's imagine your site is using a particular technology, an enterprise technology. I wouldn't even name what tech stack is, but imagine using that you've got a single sign-on, and you're going to say, I'm going to sign on to this technology. I've got one username and password, that's it. And I want it to work with every CRO and every sponsor. And also, because I've got this technology, I also want to be able to leverage my training in this technology, because I've got my one sign-on, and therefore I've only got one sign-on. Therefore, why shouldn't it remember that I was trained last month, the month before, whatever, right? So I think that is a very valid, and I think in that scenario, effectively, Daniel, you would effectively own your license of that to some degree, own your own training. The fact you're being invited into it by a sponsor or CRO, doesn't actually change that. You effectively, this is mine. I can say to the sponsor when you're answering a feasibility form, yep, I'll tick the box that I use and enabled for that technology. Or even I'm enabled with a standardized methodology. It doesn't need to be a single technology. It could be I comply with these open standards for X or Y. Yeah. So that in that way, you would potentially get the best of both worlds, because you would have a degree of autonomy to use your own preferred technology, but you would also be able to assure a level of standardization to the sponsor CRO, so they don't think it's just a big Wild West when they're trying to, kick off their study.
And then you wouldn't have stacks of devices like Brad had at his last presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, good point. ePro is trickier though. That's a tricky one. But you could say this for EDC. You could say this for ISF. Site files where if you're, again, I'll try not to mention names, but if you are using a particular product that supports your site files in Study X, there's nothing, as long as you've got single sign-on licensing for that, why use it for Study Y with some other sponsor?
So that's actually a really good point, Doug. You said EDC, we said IRT, we said all of these things that are definitely 100%, I agree, sponsor facing. It's a result of delivering data to the sponsor that makes sense to have some kind of a collaboration with that. Let's talk about the eClinical technologies that might make more sense for sites to select or choose based off of services performed. eConsent is the elephant in the room. It's literally the performance of a service in a clinical trial that makes sense. What other technologies do you think would be logical for sites to own based off of their specialized logistics at their site or in their situation?
Site CTMS systems. Actually, the term CTMS, clinical trial management system, is a bit weird because it actually describes many things to many people. So a site CTMS system is almost, unrelated to a sponsor CTMS system. They do different things, but they provide trial management capabilities for the organization. And so Brad use, site CTMS systems, and I'm sure it does all these cool and useful things that you need. And the same could be said for, at KCR, we use Viva Vault CTMS, and it does stuff that we need, right? It doesn't help you guys, to a degree, but, you've got your system to do that. That's not to say they couldn't become one of the same system. And one of the systems, extend the term. So it's site CTMS and, sponsor CTMS are two different modules and they work together. So but that's an example where you've got one.
To that point, I think a lot of the site CTMS systems now do pretty much contain the things that sites sort of can own, quote unquote, right? Like they all contain eConsent, they all contain eReg, they all have I can pay the patients myself, eSource, those sorts of things that are sort of the easy, low-hanging fruit. Now, how much do some of those things actually help us? Because we still have to do double data entry, we still have to it only moves the needle like a little bit. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic still. And like I've thought about this question a million times, and like the truth is, as somebody who runs sites, I don't care. I just want it to not suck. I don't care if you own it. I don't care if you own it or I own it or someone else owns it. I'm not invested in the idea that I need to own it.
Yeah.
I just need the experience to not be absolutely
Honestly,
terrible.
Brett, I think the only way for it not to suck is if you owned it, because only you know your site.
Well, and that's been my sort of like kick in the pants to go look at eConsent systems, to try all the CTMS, to look at all the different ISF systems out there that are available to sites, because right now that's the only leverage I have is like if I say, no, we're using this eConsent platform or whatever the case is, I don't want to use yours. But ultimately, like I don't want to have to do that. I just want whatever systems exist to not be shitty. That's all the bare minimum of what I want.
Like Paul and I, maybe we would need to work with our vendor management and add the "does it suck" to the top of the RFP list, and maybe that would iron out some of the systems.
Yeah, I keep thinking it's because there's so many different ways of working that we're throwing so many different solutions at the sites, and I wonder if we could as an industry, if we were more unified in our ways of working, therefore our solutions would be better and less numerous. That would be helpful. Am I looking at it the right way? Do you, as site, as workers at the site, is that the right way to look at it?
The longer like this kind of stuff goes on, the more I agree with that. I think there's this weird Fox, I don't know, you may even differ, but like there's this sort of like weird idea at sites that are like, we do it our way and it should be our way only. And I do think in a lot of ways that hinders what can be done, because every site wants to do things their own way. And there are all kinds of models of site. And to some degree, I think sites need to be willing to be like, come together, shut up about trying to do every little thing your own individual way, and agree on some standards, you know, so that we can.
It's not limited to the sites.
Fair.
Way of thinking. I think it's
every study team,
even within certain therapeutic areas.
Spot on. And see, I think
owners.
So yeah, the whole don't tread on us thing, it's a thing and it happens. I think there's a lot of sites coming together who are like, we're tired of this. Can we just all come together and figure out what a good industry standard is at the site level, chosen by the sites? This is like going back to the whole, these are the credit cards we accept kind of thing. I think that there are conferences even coming together doing this, creating a site level standard that can be communicated to sponsors and vendors saying, this is the standard that we accept as site facing professionals. And I did want to, so Brad, the comment from Leslie was very interesting. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we run into all the time. Do you really think sites think they consider this whole sponsor of choice thing, or is it just a buzzword? And Leslie, I can tell you, yes, 100%. There are sites that say, I will never do another trial with this sponsor or that sponsor, or this sponsor uses this CRO. I better quadruple the budget because I know how hard it is to work with them. So it really is a big deal, and sites are starting to talk together more, which means that it's becoming even more of a big deal. Which also means that when sites start to talk to each other more, as she said at the end, this is going to be eventually a tech factor. When sites start to come together as a voice to communicate, maybe as end users, their needs or their conveniences or their dislikes. So the tech vendors that start to listen to that, to accommodate for that, will be better. So I've got one technology. Go ahead, Brad.
No. I think the impact is a little different and not so much on the front end. Like, I've never turned down a study because I'm like, oh, I don't like that EDC or whatever the case may be. But I've gotten into studies. I immediately realized like the way the technology flow works is a complete pain in the ass. I can't get things to work. And as a result, that study becomes deprioritized. The study with the more well thought out process and the better tech is going to get more attention. Yep. And so that study just kind of withers away on the vine, while the more well thought out, more sort of well curated trial gets more attention. So it's not always that I'm turning them away. And in fact, that's probably terrible for the sponsor, right? Like, yeah, we're going to take the study, but then you're just going to kind of sit on the sidelines because your technology stinks.
Yeah.
And by that time, it's too late because the technology is selected. They've done all the work to get it running for the trial and so on. Yeah.
Yep.
And we have had CROs come to us and say, hey, do this trial. What EDC are you using? And as soon as they told us, we had to substantially increase their budget because we knew how much time it would take to be part of that. And it was beyond their anticipated budget because they didn't factor in the amount of time it took to work with their technology. We didn't get that trial. And it's because we had to factor in the time to utilize the technology, and the CR didn't want to pay it. So those are true stories. Those really do happen.
Mm-hmm. One of the challenges, maybe if we've only got 12 minutes or so, if we can maybe spin it around a wee bit and talk about potential solutions, and I'll volunteer something. So one of my headaches is the fact that decisions can be made based on a glossy look and feel, or attending a conference and seeing a demo. And it's very difficult. You see all these unified platform vendors, and some of them are not platform vendors. Some of them are really sucky as platform vendors. And I really wanted to try to get to the bottom of what who's actually providing a platform. And when I talk about platform, I'm actually not just talking about one vendor. I'm talking about taking these technologies together and making them work in a study, right? So I created a measure that measures how platform a platform is. And you can take your clinical trial and you can take all your technologies and you can feed it into this and it will give you a score. And obviously, if you get high score, everything speaks well together. Everything properly supports single sign-on. And in theory, at least from the strategic level, things should work well together. It doesn't necessarily say that a particular ADC system's got that bell and that whistle. That's something else, but at least they work together, right? So I prepared this. I'm now working with ACDM to try to validate it. I'm abusing the word validate there, but to basically make sure that it does actually make sense. And the idea is we make this available and anyone can sit down, any study manager who's picking some technologies off the shelf can go, hold on a minute, let me just measure that. And if it scores less than 50, throw it out and look for something else, right? If it scores more than 100, great. It's looking good. It'll work well together, right? And I think, it's very, very difficult to see behind the curtain. They've got the marketing messages. We've got all these things hammered at you. If you're an exec, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to figure this stuff out. So that's, to me, part of the problem is, as KCR, we get approached by sponsors that say, we'd like to use that technology for the study. Now, what was the basis of that decision? It looked good in a demo, potentially, right? Now, they may have good reasons, and if it measures up, great. Let's go for it. Let's use that. But it may not.
And that's a great idea. And you really won't know something unless you figure out a way to measure it. I love the identification of a metric to understand whether or not something can be. So when you're measuring the platformness of something, you're almost measuring the interchangeability of it within the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, because it reminds me of a discussion we had, Brad, actually, about having some sort of site approval or patient approval of technology to prove that it's been actually developed with the input from sites or patients to make sure that it's going to fit within the workflows and be usable.
In terms of solution, or trying to spend these last few minutes talking solution, I think that's part of it for sure. I don't know the answer, man. I worry that sites also want to own their own stuff. We're just creating the same problem at the site level, because now I'm already turning into everything I hate, because I'm telling my staff okay, we're using this for eSource, we're going to use this for eConsent, we're going to use this for RISF, and I'm like, damn it, I'm doing everything I hate. I don't. Now I understand why we're in the situation that we're in. So I don't know, and I'd love to talk more about the concept of platform, because the longer we go, the more that seems to make sense to me. But I feel like I may be missing out on the downsides, because, again, for me, I don't care. I don't care what's happening on the back end. That's for you nerds to decide and figure out. I just need an easy experience on the front end, right? I mean, I don't feel like that's a lot to ask
for all
level.
stakeholders. I think Sylvain was right. It's for all stakeholders, and we do need a better mechanism to measure stakeholder buy-in. So it's not just study manager who thinks, oh, cool technology, right, that's what we're going to use. It's got to be all the stakeholders. So we need to come up with a mechanism to measure on an ongoing basis. It's not just, do you like the demo as well? It's got to be a better measure to say this is good. And then maybe come back to one of the original points made, some of these, graveyard tech solutions that really shouldn't still be used will die, and we'll get to the truth of what works for the sites and what doesn't work for the sites.
Yeah. So I guess what I could say, and this is, of course, my specialty, but that question about asking the vendors, if sites had money and they could afford tech, would you go to them? The answer was yes. So my solution might be, well, let's get sites the money that they need so they can reinvest in their businesses. Because if that were to happen, then they would have a better ability to develop the technology to keep up with what the sponsors are expecting. There was a question in here about paper. Will paper ever go away? I don't know, I forgot who said it, but point is, no, paper will never go away unless sites can have low barrier access to electronic systems. because
Yeah. I hate to say it, but yeah, as we're looking at e-consent, they're like, hey, cool, $1,000 to get started, and then
just not feasible.
$50 for every consent. I'm like, hey, cool, paper's free. I mean,
So
I hate to say that, but like,
my recommendation is, and that goes back to the question, if the answer to this podcast question is yes, sites should have their own eClinical technology, then I would highly encourage the sponsors to consider fully funding their trials to sites to the point where they could reinvest in their infrastructure and then be better sites for you. I have case studies now. I have done auditing visits of my sites, found them 6 figures. The very first thing they did was reinvested in technology to make themselves more competitive. The very first thing. We've always wanted to do this or that. They invested in it. They became better sites. So if you give them the money, they will, the responsible ones, not the ones that pocket all the profits, not what I'm talking about. You'll know them when you see them. But the ones that continually improve with the margins that they are given are going to be the ones that are going to be your high-performing sites who reinvest in their infrastructure. That, from my perspective, is the key. Get them fully funded to the trials so that they're not living in poverty and depending on sponsors to create the technology for them.
But then you'd need to have a shift in the technology itself as well.
Yes.
Because going back to what we were talking earlier about, like selecting your own technology at enterprise level, you wouldn't select a full IRT. You would select just what you need to manage your pharmacy and to do your patient visits.
Like an a la carte, like you're almost going
exactly.
A la carte.
So you'd need, and the like Paul wouldn't select a full IRT anymore because sites would own part of it. So he would have to select something different. So you'd have to have a shift. Like if we want that to be applied to technologies that also are adapted to each protocol, then I think you need to have a proper shift in how the technology is built. And maybe it becomes less of an IRT, it becomes more of a patient management at site level. And then from a sponsor point of view, you get a different type of system that does maybe not just IRT, does a bit more as well.
Yeah. Well, and the focus would be for the sponsor IRT to interact or integrate with that software,
yes.
which we really don't do today. I understand a lot of that has to be re-entered by hand again, today. So the focus would shift a little to that interaction.
But that's where the platforms actually could come in. So if you, let's say I was developing a new piece of software today, I think I would develop a piece of software for the buyer right now who's a sponsor, and I would also develop free software for the sites. And in that free software for sites, I would make it useful and valuable across all sponsors to be then something they can then take forward and go, actually, I'm now enabled with this. And that would then help tick the box for their suitability and value to future sponsors, right? So that would have benefits to all parties because all of a sudden there would be a greater incentive to working with certain sites who had this technology. And it would be better for the sponsors because they're going, great, they've already been trained, they've already got an account, great, they're ready to go. So I could see that happening. And to be honest, I don't see a big downside. And I would also imagine that, as a software vendor or someone who used to work as a software vendor, they'd be looking at the sort of plus version of the product for the site. So if the site wants to do more and wish to invest in that to have additional modules or add-ons, fine, fair game, sell that. So,
Doug, in our interview, you used website creation as a perfect example with WordPress, where, when you develop a website, you as the admin of the website have the opportunity to get all of these little bells and whistles to add to your website for a good experience. There's no reason why that couldn't be for clinical research.
Correct. But I think it relies on something. I picked WordPress for a reason. WordPress is an underlying platform that everyone sort of recognizes. And we need the same for clinical research, where you've got something that is effectively pluggable. And you say, as a vendor, you have to say, right, I could do everything, but I don't have the bandwidth, but I can open up, I don't hate calling APIs, but open up the door for other service providers, other technology providers to plug in to do things that my platform can do, but I'm not going to do myself.
Perfect.
I think it'll happen.
Someday.
I won't
We'll
do
get
it.
there.
Somebody else will.
See, any final words? I'm happy to stay over if you guys have any sort of finishing thoughts. I'm curious more from the sponsor perspective, and I'm sorry, Paul, I feel like we heard enough from you because you guys are at sort of at the top, right? Like, you're purchasing the tech or developing it or whatever the case may be, and sort of we're handing it down to the sites, so to speak. So I think you have a really interesting perspective. Like, how do sponsors view this?
I think our focus continues to be on kind of getting our houses in order in our ways of working, working in a consistent way. We've talked about standards a lot. We've realized that we're not there. And I think some of our take on it is that, the suckiness that you describe, and I'm sure is real, is a reflection of, the variability, inconsistency, the number of ways we're making you work. It's not simple, straightforward. It's different every time. That seems to be my take and other systems owners' take, is that, a lot of the experience from the site is reflective of the inconsistency that we have throughout the industry at all levels, between sponsors, between system owners, between the site level and the CRO and the sponsor. All those parties have their own take on things, and that's really being reflected in the end user experience. So I know at least me and those immediately around me, we're trying to tamp down all that variability and get consistency.
Yeah, that's
think,
fair.
Yeah.
And I think
Janssen was one of the first big sponsors to create their own portal specific to Janssen studies. If I remember, that was a couple of years ago.
There was definitely an effort to, our own companies, it's, an amalgamation of so many other different companies coming together, and over time we're trying to tamp that down and all work in a consistent way. And I feel like we're making strides there, but then I'm working differently from my neighbor, and I'm, in the sponsors. And we really want to look over the fence and align with our sponsors so that, to the site level, it becomes more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely an effort to focus on those processes and ways of working. And then the thought is that the solutions will follow. But until we get that foundation more consistent and more sorted out, the solutions won't come.
Yeah, and standardization takes time.
Yeah. You're going to have to create a culture around that.
Mm-hmm.
A culture of a lot of different opinions, a lot of different views on how things should happen. And to make that standard across everything, much less on the legal levels. I'm the big contract guy. I like to read contracts. And what a lot of people propose makes sense on an efficiency, Lean Six Sigma level until they read a contract. And they realize that doesn't work. That's not how this is structured. And the one thing I could say, Paul, is whenever you're ready, just please also feel free not only to reach out to your sponsors, but also to your sites. Because I can guarantee you they are hungry to help you. They really want to help you.
This is the one, I think when I was introducing myself, I want to get it right in my last 10 to 15 years. And so that I got doing this, because I while it's rewarding work, I still feel this, I feel like it's very hard. I think everybody's commenting at various levels, and I'll add in my own experience at the sponsor. This is all very difficult work. And I think everybody inherently wants it to be easier because it's so important. But we're definitely not there yet. But yeah, these conversations are good because you're right. I kind of work in a digital land, and my my ability to interact with some real people and get some feedback is limited, but really valuable.
Have them send you out to Oklahoma City. We'll spend some time on site.
Yeah, come on out here, man. We'll take care of you.
But no, to your point, again, I think everybody wants some change. I do like these conversations. I'll be honest. I complain a lot. I don't have a good solution. That's why I talk to you guys like you guys, because you guys are smarter than me. And maybe if you can hear, the pain points at the site level, you can distill that down in some way to just sort of help make things better. So I do. I mean, hell, I feel you could probably have a whole series about this and sort of the tangents that come off of this. But I do want to give everybody a minute or so if you got any other just sort of parting thoughts as we've gone over our time already.
Yeah. If I could just say just briefly, I think I can see the solution in my own head, right? But I also see the need for short-term solutions, and we're seeing some of these come out, such as e-portals that allow you to glue together different technologies, make it easier to get around the current problems that aren't going to go away quickly. But I'm the same as Paul. In the last years of my career, which hopefully I have a few more to go, but I don't want to be doing the same in 10 years' time that I was doing 20 years ago, because I feel it's a bit of a waste, and also being from the vendor side, I feel I've been a contributor to that waste of time for a lot of people. So I do want to see things change, and I'll keep blogging, giving my opinion at least, and hopefully there'll be people picking up some of these ideas and seeing if they actually can deliver proper solutions.
Yeah, for me, the key takeaway is about standardization, because I could build a system that sites would like to purchase tomorrow, but I don't think it would work because sponsors wouldn't be able to plug it in. So it's about finding this way of, well, it's not finding a way, actually. It's about creating more forums like this to actually get things moving. There's a good example with GS1 standards. So that's about standardizing barcodes on kits, which is moving forwards. It's involved multiple vendors, sponsors, and so on. But it takes time and it takes resources. So it's really getting it started and getting the industry to invest in it.
Yeah, my parting word would be, nothing would make me happier than if, the final 10 years were better and were different and better than the prior 10 or 20. We definitely are ripe for improvement. I feel like all these technologies and solutions have kind of popped up, but there's just been popping up, and there's never really been a cultivation of that garden, of that landscape now. And certainly, that's what the future is really calling for, is that we do it in a unified way.
I would just say that I know we're talking about technology right now, but I want to remind everyone in here that the inefficiencies that we are creating as a result of this, like what we're all seeing at all of our different levels, is literally killing people. Every single day, people die because we don't translate our technology. Let's take this out of technology and really understand the end outcome here. And that is to translate technology so people no longer die or people have better lives. That's why we're doing this. And so the premise for standardization, platforms, working together, collaborations, focusing on a single objective across the entire industry is going to be key. And don't give up, because we are making progress. And Paul and Doug, and I do believe that in the next 5 years, you're going to see little baby steps of improvement to the problems that we're experiencing right now.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. Again, I know you know, a lot of the sites we come off as oftentimes cynical, but I think there's still a sort of underlying optimism. You know, we're making the right. I think we're moving in the right direction. So I appreciate you guys coming on. Again, I think we could probably book several more of these and not have any shortage of topics to sort of drill down on. So I would consider this a loose invitation if we can do this again sometime in the near future. Otherwise, thanks everyone who commented. And it's Halloween, so, you know, go eat some candy or whatever. Until next Tuesday, guys,